morning. This is a short introduction video on anatomy and physiology. What do each of those terms mean and how do we study them? Anatomy is the branch of science which focuses on structure. So we are going to be focusing on the structures of human beings and the human body, but anatomy applies to all living things, plants, animals, microorganisms. But what we're looking at in anatomy is structures. How do the structures look? Where are they located? What's their shape? What's their size? All of those different things. So if you think about it in terms of a muscle, okay, we'll look at our bicep muscle, right? So anatomy is going to be looking at the shape of that muscle, the location of that muscle, and the size of that muscle, those types of things. Anatomy is considered to be a static study, meaning that your bicep muscle isn't going to change. We aren't going to learn more about its structure. It's going to be in the same location. It's going to have the same shape. That's what makes the bicep. So a lot of what we've learned about anatomy, we've known for a really long time because it's pretty static. We know what these structures are and they're pretty consistent. They don't change. The bicep will never all of a sudden be down in your leg, okay? So the understanding and the study of anatomy is going to be focused on dissections, really, cutting things open, living things open, looking at them, looking at their structures, drawing them, understanding them, recording them, visualizing them, and also using a microscope for looking at the structures of those things that are microscopic. Physiology is going to be taking the ideas of anatomy and those structures and explaining how those structures actually work to carry out a function. Okay, so anatomy is the kind of the what, the structures, and physiology is kind of the how. Like, how are those structures working in order for us to maintain the characteristics of life, in order to maintain homeostasis? So really, physiology is going to focus on the chemical and the molecular activities in the body. So chemistry, the chemical reactions that are occurring. It's going to focus on the electrical reactions that are occurring, the electrical signals, the electrical impulses. It's going to be looking at those types of things and how they work. So again, you think about your bicep, right? Okay, so the shape and size and the location is the anatomy, but the chemical reactions that are occurring that allow your bicep to contract and the electrical signals that are being sent down to the bicep from your brain to, again, allow the bicep muscle to contract or relax, that would be physiology, looking at the chemical and electrical processes involved in the structure. Physiology is a more dynamic study, and the reason is because physiology is constantly changing. Your body works differently in different situations. If you are ill, then your body's going to work differently. If you've been sitting around all day, your bicep's going to function in a different way than if you've done arm curls for, let's say, 8 hours straight, right? So physiology is ever changing, in part because we're always learning more and more things about it, but also because depending on the situation, your body's going to function differently. Those structures are going to behave in a different way depending on what's happening in your body and depending about the condition of your health as well, because pathology, which is the study kind of combining anatomy and physiology, is the study of disease and disease processes and how they affect your body. Those are going to change the way that your body functions. It changes your physiology. So really, we can't understand physiology without understanding anatomy, right? So anatomy is kind of the basis, the what, like I said, and then physiology kind of is the how. We divide these two fields into different subdivisions. So typically for anatomy, we will divide the structures into gross anatomy, which is those structures that you can see with the naked eye. Okay, so I can see my bicep, right? I can see bones. Typically, we will divide gross anatomy into regionals, so those areas in, let's say, your arm or your leg or your abdomen. We can do it by system, so the cardiovascular system or the structures involved in the digestive system. We can do surface anatomy, so those structures, those internal structures that are, right at the skin or, superficial level. We also have microscopic anatomy, so that's going to be looking at cells and looking at tissues and the characteristics of those two things. So cytology is cells and histology is tissues. There's also embryology, which is going to be looking at all of the structures before birth. And then physiology, typically we're going to focus or divide physiology into categories based on systemic systems. So neurophysiology is going to look at the nervous system and how all of the structures function electrically and chemically in order to allow your body to work. Pathophysiology is going to, like I mentioned earlier, combine anatomy and physiology and look at how things are functioning when there is a disease situation. Cardiovascular, again, looking at how blood's moving through your body. Renal would be focusing on kidneys. Those are just examples. So really, physiology is going to be more of a systemic approach. Physiology can get really, really complex because every single one of your organs is codependent on the activities of the other organs. It's really an amazing process your human body is, how everything works together, and a disruption in one can cause a disruption in another. Hopefully this explains to you the difference between anatomy and physiology. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask.